I'm still working inside GammaTweak.psd, found inside the 14 Levels Curves folder. And my only remaining concern vis-a-vis the brightness and contrast of this image is the overly dark shadows underneath this slight awning. What I'd like to do is breathe life into those details, and you'll sometimes hear people talk about opening up the shadows. That means they're hoping to lighten up the darkest areas of the image. Now, one way to work would be to grab the Dodge tool, which you may recall from Chapter 9 of the Fundamentals portion of this series. And then you could go ahead and paint under the awning. Now, I'm getting the Ghostbuster icon because I have my adjustment layer active. So I'm going to collapse my adjustments panel and switch to the background layer, and then I'm going to paint over it. And you can see that that makes a big difference very quickly. So the Dodge tool allows you to make quick edits inside of an image like nobody's business. However, let's say you want more control than that. I think we can do better. And in that case, what we need to do is take a slightly more disciplined approach. We need to select these shadow details here, and then we need to brighten them using another adjustment layer. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on a Mac to undo the Dodge tool. And then I'm going to switch to this tool right here, the Quick Selection tool. Not my favorite selection tool inside of Photoshop, however, quite good at selecting areas with obvious edges, which definitely defines these tiles right here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and drag across the tiles like so, and that does quickly select them, although I selected down into this region right here. And what I've noticed in Photoshop CS5 is that the automated selection tools have a habit of behaving differently depending on whether you're working on a pixel-based image or an adjustment layer, which I have to say is a little peculiar because you would think they're always watching the composite image. However, it does make a difference what's selected. So check this out. Notice this region above the sundial is selected. I'm going to switch over to my adjustment layer. I'm going to press Control-D, Command-D on a Mac to deselect that image, and I'm going to paint that exact same brushstroke with the Quick Selection tool, and this time I do not select down into that region above the sundial. So go figure. In fact, the only cleanup I have to do is in this area right here. So I'll press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and paint over these non-shadow details in the midsection of the image, and I get this effect right there. Now, at this point, you might think, ay caramba, this is awesome. We've got an accurate and quick selection outline out of the Quick Selection tool. But if you were paying any attention to Chapter 8, then you may recall that the Quick Selection tool delivers selection outlines with ratty edges, and you can never trust the marching ants. So what we're going to do is click on the Refine Edge button here in order to bring up the dramatically enhanced Refine Edge dialog box here in Photoshop CS5. But here's another weirdness of working on an adjustment layer. This time, the adjustment layer is not helping us, it's hurting us. And what we're seeing here, instead of seeing a little sliver of the image, do you recall this? Once again, from our earlier discussion of Refine Edge, we saw a preview of it. I'm going to explain it in more detail in a future chapter. But for now, what we should be seeing, what I'd expect to see, is the selected area, these tiles, that is, against a white background in our case. However, I'm seeing a Mobius tube instead because Photoshop isn't smart enough to see through the adjustment layer to the image below. And then if we start making modifications, check this out. These are the changes that I'll be making. I'll be raising the radius value to 20. Notice the bizarre, completely unacceptable edges that we're getting right there. And then I'll turn on the Smart Radius option. I'll explain what I'm doing here when we do it for real. And I get this haloed effect. Altogether unacceptable. I'll cancel out. And let's switch to the background layer instead and compare the results. I'll go back to Refine Edge. Now we see the actual image against a white background. And by the way, we do want to preview the selection against a white background because that affords us the most contrast. And if you're not seeing white, then click inside this view icon and choose on white like so. All right, I'll go ahead and hide that drop-down menu. Now watch what happens when I raise the radius value to 20 pixels. Much better results this time around. And incidentally, I want you to make sure, just in case, that the adjust edge values are all set to 0. Decontaminate color should be turned off. We don't want any of these options for this effect right here. What the radius value does is it intelligently seeps the selection outline into different luminance levels. And it seeps the selection according to the luminance. So in other words, if we've selected a dark area, then it will seep into other dark areas, seep away from the highlights, and create a nice soft edge between the two. But I'm also managing to seep the selection a little bit into the hard edges of the tiles, which I don't want. So I'm going to turn on this checkbox right there, Smart Radius, which treats the soft edges and the sharp edges differently. So when you turn that on, notice that the tiles darken up. Now the shadows darkened up a little bit as well, which actually long-term benefits the selection outline. But we definitely needed to keep those tile details nice and sharp because by virtue of the fact they were going light on us, that meant they were becoming translucent and we were seeing through to the white background. Anyway, notice how different this looks when we're working on the background image as opposed to the adjustment layer. So just bear that in mind. If you're getting weird, aberrant results out of your automated selection tools inside Photoshop, try switching away from the adjustment layer or even to the adjustment layer because it helped us where the quick selection tool is concerned. All right, I'll go ahead and click OK in order to generate that selection outline. In the next exercise, we'll use this selection to mask another levels adjustment layer.